current role of the transportation sector in climate change emissions?
So historically, electricity generation and transportation have been the two biggest, with electricity being slightly larger than transportation. But just in the last few months, transportation emissions have risen and look in the future as though they'll be larger than electricity. And so this really highlights that we have some very good strategies to cut emissions in the electricity generation, renewable energy efficiency, phasing out coal, and transportation. We have some good strategies, but we have a lot more work to do. That's likely to be the most challenging sector to decarbonize going forward.
So electricity, if anything, has shrunk or at least leveled off, right?
Emissions from electricity have been falling, and especially that's been as coal generation has fallen.
Right, whereas transportation continues to rise.
Yeah, I have sort of a detailed graph in a recent plot. Of course, there's always ups and downs with the economy and things like that. So I would say transportation's sort of been flat and risen a little recently, and electricity is falling faster. So hopefully we can bring them both down, and the question's how quickly, because to meet the targets, to stabilize the climate with an increased temperature of less than 2 degrees C or better still 1.5 degrees C is going to require very rapid reductions by 2050.
So we're not doing badly, but we need to do a lot better still.
Yeah, definitely. We've started to make some good progress, but there's a lot more work to do.
So besides climate change, what are some other major environmental impacts from the transportation sector?
Well, so of course, transportation emissions are responsible for a lot of air pollution, and that has a lot of health impacts, especially heavy-duty trucks create a lot of local air pollution and health impacts. And of course, the extraction of oil in particular has a lot of environmental problems, in the places where it's extracted, and the transportation of oil often leads to environmental problems, some very famous ones. And so, so across the whole supply chain, there are environmental challenges associated with oil production. We focus primarily on climate, which is certainly the largest, most profound, most challenging of those, but there are many environmental problems. And not just environmental problems, of course, our transportation system is responsible for a lot of negative health impacts as well, from collisions to lack of exercise, all sorts of things about our transportation system that we could improve.
Right, so the whole system, from extraction to burning the fuel has many side effects.
Right.
Okay, and we've had corn ethanol, I think, for about the last 10 years, but some environmentalists have been critical, saying that the machinery and fertilizer and pesticides actually cause such great impacts that we really don't get much environmental benefit out of it, and that it's driven up food prices. What's your response to that?
I've spent a lot of time studying that over the last few years, and so really between 2005 and 2010, our fuel system went through a major change, and since 2010, about 10% of all the gasoline sold in the United States has been ethanol. And that change, especially the very rapid change, so the food price impacts were especially associated with the fact that we did that so quickly. We went from very small amount of corn, a very small share of the corn crop being used to make fuel, to that being the sort of single largest use of corn, and together with meat production accounting for the vast majority of the corn. And so that the suddenness of that transition caused a lot of problems. Prices have subsequently stabilized, so I think that was, as far as food prices were concerned, it was more a function of how quickly it happened than the absolute scale. In terms of the net emissions for climate emissions, there's been a lot of scientific discussion about the best way to measure that. And I think where we are now, the most recent estimates are that corn ethanol offers, typical corn ethanol production is modestly less polluting than gasoline. But certainly there's a lot of negative consequences of it, and it's really the intensity at which we produce corn for whatever we use it for animal feed as well as for ethanol, and that has water pollution problems, erosion problems, all sorts of problems. So there's a lot to do to improve our agricultural sector, going forward. But I think one point that's important is that this transition happened between 2005 and 2010 for a variety of reasons, but it doesn't look like it's a reversible transition. So it seems like these linkages between our agricultural system and our fuel system are here to stay. And so I think the more productive question is, how do we mitigate these problems? How do we improve our agricultural system? And the sort of, was corn ethanol a good or bad idea, sort of the yes-no question, that's really behind us now. And so now I think we need to figure out how to improve both our fuel system and our agricultural system as we move forward.
Okay, so what are some of the big ideas for improving the agriculture system?
Well, one of the big ideas is just, what we grow. And so I think that the single biggest challenge is the kind of intensity of focus on just these two crops, kind of corn and soybeans. And so, that's where in our report, the section on biofuels, we talked a lot about making biofuels out of other things, making biofuels out of waste products, but really in the long term, making biofuels out of perennial grasses. And the reason for that is that our agricultural system really would improve a lot if we relied more on perennial grasses and less on corn and soybeans. So today our biofuels are made from corn and also from soybean oil. Those are the two biggest sources. And so of course then they intensify the focus of the agricultural system on corn and soybeans. If we could diversify and incorporate perennials into our agricultural system, we'd be doing ourselves a big favor in terms of erosion, in terms of water pollution, in terms of building soil carbon, and we could also produce some very low carbon fuel that way. And so I think that's, when we think about, how are we going to fix this system, or how are we going to fix both systems, make low carbon fuels and improve the sustainability of our agricultural system, the importance of perennials is key.
Okay, and those are ready, those alternative biofuels are ready for production now, or does the technology still need to move forward a little?
Well, so the first of these commercial scale cellulosic biofuels, so this is what we call it when we make ethanol or another fuel out of the cellulose, the inedible fibrous part of the plants instead of the starches or vegetable oils. That cellulosic technology has been scaled up. It's operating at commercial scale in a couple of facilities. And so, there's more than 100 corn ethanol facilities. And so it is at commercial scale in a couple of facilities. But of course, for it to become, the major source of fuel, we need lots more of those facilities. And so, we've really come a long way in the last decade as far as bringing that technology out of, university labs to kind of scale up pilot plants and now to the first commercial scale facilities. But clearly, this is a very big industry, and so to have an impact, we need to keep scaling that up.
Okay, so almost ready, and we just need to make it more widespread.
Yeah, people often say, it's always 5 years away, and I guess that's because our time horizon's 5 years. So, we've made a lot of progress in the last 5 years. There's we'll need to make more in the next 5 years, and we won't be done then. So.
But we've seen explosions in the amount of wind and sun, so
yeah, that's right.
Happen.
No, that's right, and those weren't in the laboratory 5 years ago, right? They were already large industries 5 years ago. They're much larger now, and they should be much larger than that 5 years hence. So that, steady growth is what we need. We've seen important progress, but we're not in the middle of a steady growth for these kinds of advanced biofuels now, and so, we need to accelerate that and make more progress than we have in the last couple of years.
Okay, great. Turning to electric cars, which some people see as the real long solution, especially if they're powered by renewables. But people also worry about range anxiety, that the cars won't get them where they need and it takes hours to refuel. So how viable do you see the move to electric cars, and how fast do you see them being able to pretty much take over our transportation system?
Well, so electric cars, of course, are on the road today, growing rapidly, but not dissimilar to what we were talking about with the fuel production. Even rapid growth to reach the scale of our vehicle fleet is going to take time. As far as range anxiety, we've done my colleagues have done a lot of work in this area. We've done a lot of surveys to look at what's the range that's necessary for most drivers. And what we found is that in a survey we did it together with Consumers Union in 2013, 69% of the respondents drove less than 60 miles on an average day. And so, the vehicles that are on the road today can serve their needs most of the time. And so, and vehicles coming online next, vehicles like the Chevy Bolt, the Tesla Model 3, are kind of more affordable vehicles with range up to 200 miles. Okay. And so, electric vehicles can serve a significant share of the population now, but not everybody. But as electric vehicles mature and improve, they'll serve more and more people. And of course, there are plug-in hybrid electric vehicles which can operate on electricity for those typical trips that you make most days, and when you need a longer range, can also run on gasoline. So there's a variety of solutions. I don't think range limitations are a fundamental concern. The other thing is, of course, we're steadily building out more recharging infrastructure, and so that can mitigate this challenge as well. So I think it's clear that the long-term direction for clean transportation is electric vehicles, low carbon electricity, especially renewable electricity, and we need to move as fast as we can to address this. To support this transition, because really that's where that's going to be required to meet the deep decarbonization that we need by the middle of the century, and it's going to take decades to replace the whole fleet. So we need to move as quickly as we can now.
So we are getting started, but maybe too slowly.
Yeah, well, we always should be going faster than we are, but I think there's a lot of signs of progress and reason. But it's important for policymakers to maintain support and to some of the surveys we've done, a lot more electric vehicles have been sold in California than other states, and right. One of the things that we've found is that electric vehicles aren't available on lots in a lot of other states, and so there's always a question of are consumers choosing not to buy electric vehicles, or do they not really understand that choice? And so I think that's another thing, sort of education, making sure the vehicles are available, making sure people understand whether they'll work for them. Is an important part of keeping this progress going.
Right. So you've got the consumer side, but you've also got the education, advertisement, availability right. side. But there are some environmentalists who think that the individual automobile might be a dead end because it depends on a road network. Mm-hmm. Parking, that all has its own impacts, like runoff and habitat fragmentation, and when you're adding 1 billion Chinese to the market mm-hmm. worldwide, it's not that viable to keep depending on cars, even if they're electric. How do you respond to that?
Well, the way that I think about it is, clearly, we started the conversation by how large a source of emissions the transportation sector is. And, mm-hmm. and to address that, we're going to need to make changes to the vehicles, making existing vehicles more efficient, or existing technology more efficient, and moving as fast as we can to electric vehicles. We're going to need to address that in the fuels, making all the fuels cleaner, moving the electricity towards renewable electricity, moving the biofuels towards cleaner, more sustainable sources of biofuels, and making sure oil doesn't get any dirtier. That's a major subject of our recent report, is how we can make sure that oil doesn't get dirtier. But we certainly need to transform the transportation system. And I think there's a lot of enthusiasm, excitement now that a system which has really been quite static since about the post-World War II years, is starting to change. And we're looking for more changes in this system, how we get around, how we move goods in the next decade than we've seen in the last 50 years. And so I think the opportunity to address some of those fundamental challenges, how much space cars take up when they're parked, how much the road network interferes with our ability to get around by on foot or by bike or whatever. The opportunities to really transform our transportation system with by changing the way we drive, by changing the way we own, the kind of the business models, sharing transportation more than relying on single ownership of a private car. All of these things are starting to shift, and I think that's a great opportunity, a reason for optimism, but also a reason to focus on making sure those shifts move us in the right direction.
Okay, so do you see like public transit such as bus and rail as a major and growing component of the future transit system, or is it going to be more kind of Uber and car sharing, and once you get driverless you order up your own vehicle to get you where you want, or some combination of the two?
Well, I think my expectation is it will certainly be different combinations than we see today. So I think the clearest thing is that the system's going to look quite different. And so I guess rather than thinking of, is it going to be cars or is it going to be buses, I think we may have all sorts of different arrangements, and the important component is in a way, is whether those vehicles are shared or single use, whether they're electric or powered by oil, whether they provide mobility in a kind of equitable way so that all communities can access what they need, and whether they improve health and safety outcomes. So those broad goals are clear, and the detailed configurations, and in particular things like which company's name is going to be on the bill or on the side of the vehicle, that'll sort itself out. But the goals about what and the principles that define a cleaner, more equitable, safer transportation system, I think those are what we need to focus on.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Sure.